Welcome back to Destination Video Music, August 1st, 1981, the podcast. I go by the name Ford Lee, and this is episode 4. And today I am here with Vil. Hi, Vil, how are you?
Doing good, you?
Good, good, thank you. I am excited because you are not the first person who reached out to me who witnessed the launch, but you're the official first person that I've interviewed that witnessed the launch of MTV. So I'm very excited about this and looking forward to talking about it. So before we talk about the launch and you watching it, it's 1981. It's August 1st, 1981. How old are you? Where were you in life? Where were you living? What were you doing? Take me back to that year.
Okay, well, I had at that point I was still kind of new to Skokie. I had grown up until I was 4.5 in Chicago. At this point now I was 5 and very nearly 6, like a month and 12 days away. And I was living with my grandparents on my father's side in Skokie, kind of an odd place too in Skokie because if I walked out into the middle of Jarvis Street, I was on the corner of there and Kenneth Avenue. If I was to put one foot in the middle of the street and the other foot next to it in the middle of the street, half of me would be in Lincolnwood.
Oh,
Kind
it was one of those. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. And we had cable due to the virtue of piracy at the time. And I don't remember exactly how I heard that MTV was coming around. I know it was being advertised in some ways, and my friends and I were all excited. And yeah, it was summer. I didn't have a bedtime in summer. I could stay up as late as I wanted, and so I was eagerly anticipating. I even remember the channel number was 41 on the cable box.
Wow.
So
Okay.
my grandparents had no interest in seeing this, but they didn't care. They had a TV up in my room and one in their room. Their room was bigger, so I went in there, brought my snacks with me, flipped on 41, and just waited for, well, the big countdown that, is history now.
Yeah, but I mean, this is all so fascinating that you have those memories, especially being so young. I mean, you said you were very close to turning 6, right?
Yes.
So obviously, yeah, I have musical memories that are well ingrained in my head from that young of an age, but to be able to witness the launch at such a young age must have been a really cool experience. I mean, what before we get a little more into the launch, did you even have a musical taste yet by that age because you were so young, or did you kind of listen to everything? What was that like?
At that age, I didn't really start to have too much of a musical taste. That would come a little bit later. But I was kind of already I was more into the rock side of things. I didn't know what rap was until I was 9. And back then it was still kind of good because they still like played their own instruments. But soon that became something I couldn't stand to hear. But back at this point in my life, it was just kind of all over the place. Like I was listening to a lot of metal, new wave, rock, classic rock, pretty much everything MTV had at the time.
Right. And then you said your friends were excited as well. So, I mean, obviously, this must have been something that if you were hanging out with your friends during the summer or heard about it at school, this is something that I'm assuming your friends also had musical tastes, right? Because the reason I'm bringing that up is I can't, I'm thinking about when I was that age, it was hard to find other young people that listened to a lot of the same things I did. So, did you have friends that kind of listened to the same things that you did?
Yeah, as far as, the whole thing of not being able to find friends that listen to the things that I like, that wasn't until my musical taste got eclectic much later on. But
Got
at
it.
that point, and yeah, we were pretty much all like I was, at least in my area. I can't speak for my whole generation, obviously. But yeah, it was just, we loved music, and this whole idea of being able to watch it in video form was just neat as hell, and we were excited.
Sure. Now, you said when we were talking before, you remembered some of the ads for it, right?
Um, I I remember that there were ads. I don't remember the exact heads.
Sure.
That part of my memory is way too hazy.
Sure, of course. Of course. So take me to the launch. I mean, it's that evening. Were you by yourself or were you with your friends watching the
Uh,
launch? I think you said you're by yourself, right?
yeah, it was. I could stay up as late as I wanted, but and us Gen Xers were out late at night, but not many 5-year-olds were at their friends' houses at midnight.
Right, of course. Unless you're having a sleepover
Asleep,
or,
which I
something.
wasn't.
Right.
And yeah, it was just I was eager to watch it. My grandparents wanted to watch most likely their musicals or news or something at that time. So I went up, I slapped on the channel, and I just waited for it to begin. I was like laying on my stomach on the bed. I had snacks all around me, and it was paradise.
Wow. Yes. Imagine having that experience as a kid, right? So, what do you, I know it was a long time ago when you were young, but are there any videos or artists or bands that stand out very strongly or vividly from that night?
Well, definitely the very first one, Video Killed the Radio Star.
Sure.
I didn't even know about that song until then. And it was even at such a young age, I thought that was really fitting. And that was the primary one. And you actually asked me about that, and I kind of put up a list. But if we go to the ones that I had actually heard at the time, and that I really remember from the launch, I had to sit down and really give that thought about which ones did I really remember from then. And well, I already mentioned Video Killed the Radio Star. There's also, I hate when I get tongue twisted, Little Susie's on the Up. That's from the band PhD.
Yes. Yes.
Double Life by the Cars. Uh, that one really stuck out. Then there's Passing Strangers by Ultravox. I thought that was really cool how it was black and white and it had those snippets of color that went in there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
From that night, those are the ones that really remain in my memory the most.
Yeah, so do you remember, like, were you up all night watching this? I mean, obviously you would have passed out at a certain point, but
I want to say it was probably 3:15, 3:30. It was somewhere before 4 in the morning that I ended up falling asleep.
yeah, and then I'm sure when you woke up, it was like, well, gonna put that right back on.
Yeah, I was watching it a lot. Back in the beginning, I was watching MTV for hours at a time.
Yes, yeah, well, absolutely. I would have done the same thing. So I'm gonna go back at first to the videos that you mentioned because you're the first. I'm always happy to do these interviews because it always seems like somebody brings up a different video that stands out to them. There are some of the same. Everybody's mentioned the Buggles, but of course, how
It's
could
the
you not?
first
I mean,
one.
but and I'm sure I mean I think they were playing Video Killed the Radio Star for years on a regular rotation as kind of an homage to them being the first video. But PhD, great mention for people who are listening. PhD is British band who really didn't do much in America until Tesla covered Little Susie's on the Up and called it Little Susie. Um, I love that cover. I love that version, but I also love the original. But the video for PhD's Little Susie's on the Up with is a quirky video. I recommend that people go on YouTube and check that out. There's Fish. There's the lead singer in a tux. There's a fake roll up piano. Everything you could possibly want as a child, I'm sure. You also mentioned the Cars, Double Life, right?
Yeah, the Cars, I just have, sorry, I had to interject real quick. They
That's
were
okay.
one of the bands that I really liked the most on MTV back in those days. My musical tastes have changed a lot, and I still love the Cars.
Oh, they're a great band. Um, the Cars, I'm glad you brought up Double Life because that I think is a perfect example of why did, if you look at it in the frame of why did MTV choose that one? Like, it wasn't a hit. It really was not one of their bigger songs, but that was the first one they played and of the Cars. And I think it's really funny how they chose certain songs to be the first song for that artist. I mean, if you even look at like Rod Stewart, the third video they ever played on MTV was "She Won't Dance with Me." I mean, that wasn't one of his bigger hits, and then they played all of a lot of his other bigger hits from the 70s after that. So it's just interesting how they chose those first ones. And then you mentioned Ultravox as well. Obviously, Vienna was played on the first day, but you said Passing Strangers, right? That was the
That's the funny thing is like I haven't back then I could tell you more about Ultravox. I haven't listened to them in like forever now. That's the only song that I even really remember from them. And it sticks out so much. And I think it might be because of the fact that I saw it that night. And then of course they played it more after that.
probably, yeah, probably. But yeah, I mean, fortunately, they were one of those British bands that was making way more advanced videos than the Americans were making at that time. So I'm absolutely sure that seeing one of those videos would have stood out to you. Um, so you got through the launch, you went to bed, you woke up the next couple of, let's say, couple of months, right? I mean, school starting. Is this something that your friends had MTV as well? Or is this something that you only had? Are you talking about it? What's going on there?
Most of my friends back then, they had cable. I don't really recall any who didn't. Some might not have, I don't know for sure. But it seems to me, the way I remember it, at least, that pretty much everybody did have cable. And, that was a big thing. I mean, it wasn't the only big thing, of course, not in the 80s. We had all sorts of cool things going on. But MTV was a huge topic in the beginning. Eventually, it just kind of became normal and we all appreciated it and loved it. But it eventually got to the point where it was like not really discussion worthy. But we would still get together and watch music videos on there or whatnot when we had chances to do that.
Sure. And I do want to take it back a little bit as far as the pirate, the pirate cable. Um, when I was growing up, they had what was called the hot box, which was basically the rigged cable box that had all the channels that you had to pay for, but it was all for free. So, of course, that included, the adult channels and all that stuff. And a few of my friends had those, but we didn't have that. But what was a pirate? Because I don't know, genuinely don't know, what was a pirated cable box or cable service? What was that? Was it an actual like the hot box, or was it wired somehow?
I'm not sure if it was the hot box or not, although I kind of think that it probably wasn't because, for example, Skinamax, we all loved to try to unscramble the porn image on the Skinamax, and you never could. But the fact that we didn't have the channel, it's like I know that for a short, there was like this short gap where we paid for it, and then we just went back to pirating.
Yeah.
But it was like we always had the same box before we pirated, when we stopped pirating, and then when we went back to pirating. But what had happened was my grandfather's friend had done some stuff with the lines so that we were able to access all of the channels, and we were just supposed to keep our mouth shut and not talk about it.
Well, yeah, because that's I mean, if you had multiple cable boxes or lines or however it worked, I mean, I can't even imagine how expensive that would have been. Uh,
It probably would have been very expensive. I don't know what the costs were like back then, but
yeah, of course, of course. But
we
yeah,
weren't
I
paying.
mean, if you have the option of paying for three or four cable boxes or having three or four pirated cable boxes, I think we know what the obvious choice would be. But
So yeah, I do think that it was more of like a hot line than a hot box, but I'm not sure.
hmm hmm Yeah, that would be cool to time travel and see how that actually worked because I'm fascinated by all that, and I'm fascinated that you remember the specific channel as well. Um,
Yep.
41, you said it was, right?
41 for MTV, 44 for Nickelodeon, 18 for HBO.
So, were you watching? Something I forgot to ask you was, did you have cable prior to MTV, or did you get cable once around the time of MTV? Like, were you
Uh,
watching Nickelodeon and all of that
oh,
prior?
oh yeah, we had cable for a while, and before cable TV, there used to be a thing called On TV. You can still see freight trains that have the On TV logo on them if you're up in the Midwest sometimes.
Really?
Yeah, the O and the N are together, and then it's not cursive, but the O, the N, and then the T and the V are like all directly connected.
And what was on TV?
It was cable without being called cable, but it was more like I think it was like kind of a subscription service type thing. It was like movies, and it was mainly like movies. Like I remember we watched Jaws on TV. It didn't, if I remember correctly, 'cause again, we're talking about I was like four and younger here. On TV didn't have a whole bunch of different channels. You switched on TV and watched what was on it. And other than that, we were still watching network television. And then when cable came along, we watched the cable channels and, of course, our network channels around the cable as well.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Man, you had that early access cable for a long time.
Yeah.
Not fair, Bill, not fair. No, that's great. That's great. So, all right, it's the early MTV years, right? 81, 82, 83. What are some were there bands or artists that you saw on MTV that you quickly became a fan of, um, that you were either surprised you became a fan of or you'd never really heard much of them? What was going on there?
Uh, you know, there were bands that I had either heard of or a little bit, but didn't really know, or just didn't hear of at all. And I was impressed by them. I don't think I was really surprised that I liked them. I mean, after all, I was there to watch music, so it just kind of seemed natural to me. But it was definitely an eclectic mix of things that I found on there. I mean, hell, I actually sat down and came up with a list of the things I was listening to, and it's like if you look at this list and it goes all over the place. Like you've got the Buggles, the Cars, the Talking Heads, Duran Duran, Ultravox, Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Twisted Sister, A Flock of Seagulls, Soft Cell, Depeche Mode, Human League, the Police, the Banshees, the Sisters of Mercy. I said the Banshees, I meant Susie and the Banshees.
Hmm.
And then there's like Bauhaus, the Mission, Killing Joke, and Ministry. And you know what? Though, and I'm of course avoiding the ones that we've all heard to death, like Michael Jackson and Madonna, like you had brought up earlier. I I I could have included those as well, but it's like who hasn't heard those? So I
Right.
kind of kept them off the list. But I enjoyed listening to them too. I did like early Madonna. Um, her early stuff I thought was really great. Her later stuff I thought just kind of, yeah. I got less and less interested in her music as time went on.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
Michael Jackson's Thriller video since he came up. I remember, I don't know if it was right when it debuted or if it was one of the first times, but my dad was married to, I've had two stepmoms in my life. This was when he was married to the first one. We were over at their place in I think it was Rosemont or near there, and they had a really big television on there, and we were watching that video, and I was just like, wow, this is like a zombie movie to music. I thought it was great.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to watch it on a big TV, that's got to be a much better experience than a small bedroom TV. Um, so, y- were you listening still to the radio at that time? Or
Yes.
you were? Okay. So, one of the things I like to talk about is how radio took really a few years to catch up to MTV before MTV started defining what was on the radio. Um, were again, I know you were young, but were you still listening to the radio as much as watching MTV?
I would say definitely that I definitely was, because if I didn't have it turned on in the house, if my dad was over, he'd have it turned on. And yeah, I personally had it on a lot. I won't count my grandfather in that because he was just addicted to news radio.
Right.
Oddly enough, I even enjoyed that back then too.
Well, got to get your news somewhere, right? Yeah, it ends up being a lot of talking, but a lot of talking heads, no pun intended. Pun completely intended. But yeah, yeah, it's a fascinating I've brought this up in almost every episode so far, and it's just fascinating how long it took radio to catch up to what MTV was doing. And then MTV determined what was going to be on the radio. So yeah, I was just curious because I also wanted to know as far as owning music. You were young at the time. Were you going out and buying records with your grandparents or your dad or um, anybody buying those for you? And there's a reason why I'm digging more into
Uh,
that.
no, that's fine. And I did a little bit. I didn't really have much of a music collection really until like my mid to late teens. But I would occasionally buy something here and there.
The reason I was wondering is I was talking about this with some of the other guests as far as how MTV was playing such obscure things that they'd see a video and they'd go to the record store to try to find it, and the record store owner would go, "Who is this person? I've never heard of this band or artist before," and kids were rushing out to the record stores trying to find Buggles records, the Tubes, PhD, and they're like, "Nope, don't have it, don't have it."
Oh,
So,
yeah, well, see, that wouldn't be much. I mean, someone else may come along and correct me, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But to the best that I understand, at least that wouldn't be an issue around me because I was in the Chicago area and
right,
you find pretty much everything. I mean, hell, Chicago's a birthplace of Wax Trax Records, which is where like a lot of your industrial bands really got going.
right,
Chicago's like it's a little musical mecca. The only problem I ever had, and this wasn't from MTV. In fact, it's funny because it was similar to what happened to a friend of mine who turned me on to the band. There's a band called the Tear Garden, and I went into a record store trying to get some of their music after she turned me on to the Tear Garden, and the person insisted, "Oh, you mean Soundgarden?" And I'm like, "No, I mean the Tear Garden. It's not the same
right,
band."
right,
And that's the closest experience. I can't credit MTV for that. But speaking quickly of crediting MTV, you mentioned earlier about how they picked obscure songs.
right.
And that's one thing I love about MTV back in the day, when they still were music television, because you listen to the radio. Like if you put on a classic rock station, everybody thinks that Led Zeppelin made two songs.
Right.
And I feel like DJs have a responsibility to teach people about music and turn them on to new things. And I've said before, if I ever get into DJing, which I've thought I may or may not do in the future, just because I'm so fed up with a lot of them, that I would love to just focus on like danceable B-sides and stuff that just get ignored.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, fortunately, we live in a time with technology where anybody could create. A lot of people are turning to internet radio, right? And they're playing a lot of the things that they want to play or playing a lot of things that they wish mainstream radio would play. But I understand your point completely. It can be very frustrating listening to mainstream radio. It's if only there was, for me, I wish that there was an 80s radio station that was playing a lot of, like you said, those B-sides. And you listen to some of the stations and it's the same song. I mean, how many times I love Cyndi Lauper, but how many times can you listen to Girls Just Want to Have Fun, right? I mean, she has other songs that you just don't hear. So I get it. Well, I hope that you get the DJ gig that you have been wanting and throwing around the idea, and I'll be one of your first listeners. But yeah, the obscurity of the videos, I know early on they did that because they had such a dearth of videos available and they needed content. and a lot of that content came from England. Fortunately, some of it came from Australia and New Zealand as well. But do you remember any? I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask if you remember any other more obscure artists or bands that you became a fan of that you never heard on radio. And that could be any point of the 80s, doesn't have to be just the early.
I'm trying to think of what would be obscure. I mean, I kind of feel like it was on MTV. If it was obscure, it wasn't as soon as it got on there.
Sure.
Um,
By a certain point, absolutely.
yeah. Nothing is really coming to my mind. I mean, you might mention something later and I'll go, oh, yeah. But yeah, nothing's really coming to mind for that. Some of the stuff that I like now, I heard little bits of it then, but I wasn't aware of anything genre related and wasn't really focused on it. For example, going back to Susie and the Sisters of Mercy, and even Bauhaus. And then years later, as I got more into that type of stuff, it was like, oh, wow, I didn't even realize I'd been exposed to this. That's like the closest I could give you. And I even have a hard time calling that obscure, even though I know that's more on the underground side of things.
Right, right. Yeah, I guess the obscure factor would have been probably way more in the early 80s. Um, but, like you were saying, if it was on MTV eventually, no, there was no way that it was obscure. But it's I think the 81, 82, 83 years are the absolute ultimate years of finding bands that just completely disappeared. They're probably shown in the first year and never even mentioned it, like PhD.
Yeah.
Again, they had two videos on day one that they probably repeated like crazy and then never heard from, never saw them again until Tesla decided to make a very good choice and cover the song. But
And and the funny thing of that is like I'm aware of Tesla by name, but I don't think I've ever actually listened to Tesla.
they're, well, they're not a hair metal band, but they get lumped into the hair metal category, but they really shouldn't. But if you're into well, I should ask, are you into more of that late 80s wave of when hair metal and that late 80s rock was on MTV? Was that something you were interested in?
Back then, yeah. Now, not so much. I mean, every now and then I'll get like a weird itch and I'll decide to listen to some of it. But back then, I absolutely loved it.
Yes, well, Tesla, their cover of Little Susie's on the Up, which is just called Little Susie with a Z instead of an S, it is a great cover. It's different, but it's very of its time. But I, if I ever met Tesla, I would say thank you for deciding to cover one of the most obscure songs and videos ever played on MTV in its history. But so
I'm going to look for that cover, by the way.
yeah, yeah, and it's Tesla in a lot of their music did these long acoustic intros, and their Little Susie, their version of it, has a really nice acoustic intro, and then goes into the song, and it's I think you'll enjoy it if you like that era of music of rock. But so let's take it through, the rest of the 80s as you're going into middle school, high school. What is your relationship like with MTV? Are you still watching it regularly? Is it still kind of shaping your musical tastes?
Yeah, in middle school, it definitely was. By the time high school got around, I was watching it here and there, but not as much. And then I can't remember the point when Headbangers Ball came on because yeah, I watched Headbangers Ball, but now we're going a little bit past high school there. But during high school, I really had a whole bunch of other interests going on, and I would still listen to music, but I wasn't as into sitting down and watching videos for a long period of time. Um, I kind of came back to that a little bit later past high school.
Yeah, I think Headbangers Ball started in 87, I want to say. Yeah, so that was something that you were watching.
Yeah, little bits. I watched like the early days of Headbangers Ball. I might have caught a little bit of it, but as I got older, I wasn't watching too much like during the school year. Like in the summers, most likely when I was catching it, because that's when I could again be up later. If it was and Headbangers Ball was like late at night.
Hmm. Hmm.
I couldn't be doing that on a school night.
Of course.
But like, remember I said how I left I moved to Florida, but I was back in Illinois like when I was 18 and 19.
Yes.
I was watching Headbangers Ball regularly then. In fact, by that point, it became the only part of MTV that I could enjoy watching other than like Beavis and Butthead and Liquid Television, which even though I liked those, I think Liquid Television belonged elsewhere. Beavis and Butthead at least had music in it.
Yeah, yeah. Could you, yeah, I guess you could call it a music show, really, because it did have music videos on there, technically, being roasted by Beavis and Butthead.
That's what
But
turned
when
me into
you,
fans too.
yeah, right. But when you weren't watching MTV, where was your musical taste at? Because obviously, when I've talked about this with other guests as well, you know, as you get older, as you go into high school and college years, you really start, a lot of people start branching out musically. So,
Back then, it was kind of like I was really more into metal and stuff. And later in those years, when I moved to Florida, that was when I started really getting into death metal.
mm,
But back, if we go through kind of like the earlier part of high school, it was mostly like I had friends that were musicians, hanging out with them as they were jamming out. And like one of my buddies is just amazing with the guitar. And like you pick something off of the classic rock station from Chicago, WCKG, he could play it.
wow.
So a lot of it just became live performances of my friends.
Well, to be able to be able to just pick up the guitar and play it, that,
That
that's a
that's
level of
that's
talent.
that's an amazing skill. I wish that I had it.
Do you play any instruments?
That's a fun story. I cannot read a music sheet to save my life. Um, I actually absolutely hated music class when I was in it in like second grade. But then later in life, I decided to pick up the keyboard. Remember, I don't know how to read a music sheet,
Hmm.
but I started writing my own music like in my head and playing it. Like I could repeatedly play the songs that I came up with. And there was one that I really loved. I was like, oh, this is really good. And I'm like, there's something eerily familiar about it. And there was a reason. I don't know if you ever played Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, but I was playing an emulator.
Hmm.
And on the emulator, I was playing Simon's Quest, and it's the end music when you're going to confront the altar of Dracula, throw his parts onto the altar, and then he appears in a puff of smoke, and you have to fight him. It's like dun, 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 dun. I had rewritten that in my head on the keyboard when I hadn't played that game in years.
Isn't that crazy how that comes back to you like that? Yeah. Yeah. Things like that will happen where sometimes you're writing something and then you'll go, "Oh, that's so cool. I listen to," because I dabble on guitar. I'm not great with it, and a little bit on piano sometimes, but um then you get a little sad because you go, "Oh man, I thought I wrote something really good, but I'm just rehashing something from 20 years ago."
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
Right. Right. No, but that's great that you had that Castlevania. That was, oh man, was that Nintendo or Super Nintendo or
Castlevania 1 was Nintendo, and I want to say that Castlevania 2 was as well. And I might be remembering in that Super Nintendo. I'm sure people in the comments can correct that. But it was definitely Simon's Quest, the end sequence when you're going down the pathway. It's a side scroller. You're walking to the right. There's an altar. You throw his bones up on there and then and all of his parts, and then you fight Dracula. People who have played the game will know exactly what I mean. And it's that end music sequence when you're taking that walk to fight him that I thought
I'll
that I
link
invented.
I'll find it for when I publish this episode. I'll find the music on YouTube and also link that so people can hear your the music that Vil wrote and remembered. Yes.
I guess rewrote because I'm not the originator, but yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. I won't say copyright Vil. But great. So, you know, I've talked with other people through other episodes, and most of the people have been around your age, a little bit older, and they all seem to have relatively the same opinion of when they stopped watching MTV and why. But I always ask, you know, towards the end of the interview, kind of what was your relationship like with MTV through the years? So, you know, I know you mentioned Headbangers Ball, Beavis and Butthead, but 90s MTV was huge. It had its own moment. Um, they were still playing music videos pretty regularly, even though they had reality shows. They were still playing videos probably until, God, I would say 2015, 2016. So, are you watching MTV at all? Are you casually flipping through, seeing, oh, let's see what's on? Like, what's,
Yeah. Well, at this point, I lived in Florida. My mother, unfortunately, is one of those people that basically believes that televangelists tell the truth and she's got Jesus Christ powers. So,
uh,
MTV was Satan and I couldn't watch it at the house. So I'd watch it at my friends' places. And for me at that point, I was torn because I really felt like MTV needs to be music television,
mhm.
but a lot of the music they were playing then, at least in my opinion, sucked. I mean, there were still some good songs on there and I enjoyed those. I didn't really like that they were moving away from the format, but oh my God, the show Dead at 21 was my favorite little sci-fi series when it was on. And years later, I'm trying to find copies of it. It's like you have to go underground to find it because of licensing issues. You can't go out and get this on DVD or I'd own it.
This was a show that was on MTV?
Yeah, it was called Dead at 21. It was about there was like some sort of black ops secret program that was putting chips in the heads of infants. And basically, I think it was supposed to turn them into like some sort of super soldier or something, but something went wrong with it. And at 20, they would start having these weird visions and stuff. And then they would die when they hit 21. And the main character was with his girlfriend trying to find a way to save himself, and there were government agents trying to hunt him and kill him as part of a cover-up. And,
Wow.
and true to the nature of the title, he dies at 21. Uh,
Wow.
and it was a really good show. It should have been on a different network, but it was a really good show. And man, if anybody out there knows where it is, I hope that they put in the comments where it can be found.
Yeah. Now, what year roughly was this?
Oh God, I'm going to say, and someone will definitely be able to correct this because this is a best guess. I want to say this was around 95. And I say that because by the time, remember, I was born in 75. By the
Right.
time I was 21, that show was ancient history. I was watching that when I was like 18 or 19. So maybe ancient history isn't quite right.
Okay. No, no, I've done so much research for God, the past 20 years on MTV, and I learned two things recently. So you mentioning Dead at 21 was one of them.
Mhm.
And recently I just discovered people are talking about some show called The Young Ones, which
Yes.
was in the, I guess, mid 80s, and people kept talking about The Young Ones, The Young Ones. And I said, what is
Yes.
this? And I had never heard of this show before.
I,
Um,
I feel bad for totally blanking on that. The Young Ones was amazing, great comedy, and oh my God, they had great music on there. Like I don't know if you know the band The Damned.
yeah, absolutely.
David Vanian, I will say this until the day I die. Of course, I'll have to change it because he's older. He'll go before I do. But he is one of the best vocalists on planet Earth alive today. Eventually I'll have to say that he was, but
Right.
yeah, and
Hopefully not sometime
even
soon.
even even back then in his younger days, he had a great voice, and as he's gotten older, it's just gotten even better. But
Wow. Okay.
The Damned made an appearance on, in fact, the first time I ever heard The Damned was watching The Young Ones. And there, that's an easy show to find if you've not watched it. Google search, you'll find it.
Yeah, I'm just fascinated because I thought people were making a mistake or people were misremembering something from, the wrong year because I always thought, what was it? What was it? Dial MTV and then remote, I guess remote control. I always thought that those were the first, not Dial MTV, but remote control. I always thought that was the first non-video show on.
I
And
remember, sorry, I
no, no.
remember the name Remote Control. I don't even remember what it was.
I think it was a game, or not, I think, sorry. It was a game show. that started in the late 80s. I think Adam Sandler either hosted it or was on it or one or the other. But just everything you read and you see was everybody talks about, oh, remote control was the beginning of the end for MTV, or the real world was the beginning of the end. But I again had never heard of the young ones or and now I have to look into Dead at 21.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
sounds like a fascinating show. Although that would be a very cool concept for a music video.
yeah. You have to have one hell of a song because there's actually something was with the questions you actually that you sent that could come up. I actually sat down and wrote them out because it gave me a chance to really think about these things, and that was kind of one of the little points was MTV going down the hill, and
Mm,
if MTV does one thing I'd like to see them do is come back and yeah, I mean, there's music I like. I don't think it should just be the music I like, but for crying out loud, don't make it all rap and R&B. Put on a little of everything.
right,
And
right.
that was where MTV really went wrong even before they started getting into just being anything but music, was they got really, really narrow. It became you couldn't turn it on and have it be anything other than rap and R&B unless you were watching Headbangers Ball, which by the way didn't just do metal. That's where I first heard the Sisters of Mercy was on Headbangers Ball.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and then um
I thought they would have been more of an 120 minutes type
you,
band.
you would, but yeah, I first saw them at Headbangers. Oh, this was just really weird. It was mostly metal, but occasionally they'd slip other things in. And I think the reason is if I could ever run into Ricky Rathman and ask him, I would. Did you put other things on there just because MTV was abusing the hell out of the music and not playing enough of a variety? And my guess is he'd say you're dead right.
Hmm.
I can't speak for the guy.
Hmm.
But like you had M2 came out, and M2 at first was where you could go if you wanted to listen to rock and new wave and all of that. And then M2 became just another rap channel. And
Yeah,
if they're
yeah.
just going to do, even if it's what I like, if they're just going to do one form of music, unless it's a channel specifically dedicated to that, they shouldn't be doing that.
Right. People, yeah, the variety of it would be interesting to try and figure out what would have been the best year of MTV for variety purposes. Um, I think in the 90s, I'm thinking of going to my friends' places and because we didn't have cable until the late 90s in my house. But just thinking about going to my friends' houses and watching MTV, there was quite a mix of rock, pop, and rap and hip hop as well, and R&B, like you said. So I think in the 90s there came this resurgence of the mix because you had grunge, alternative, the 90s alternative wave, and then late 90s, watching Total Request Live with Carson Daly, it was always rock, rap, and pop battling each other for the top spot. So I think it's gone in phases of which genre they've been really pushing, you know. But that would be interesting to try and figure out what would be the ideal year for MTV as far as variety. But that'll be
Yeah,
for another episode, Ville Part Two.
that it would be interesting to figure out. I mean, to do that, it would really take some serious research, like digging into archives. Unless there's somebody out there who's got like the most amazing memory ever that happened to bear witness. Yeah, that's when you do some archive digging. Okay, what songs are they playing? I'm sure that we can find it out, and now I kind of want to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm telling you, Ville Part Two, Part Three episodes on all things MTV will be dropping. But Ville, this has been great. I usually like to end my interview with just asking my guests any year. It doesn't have to just be the 80s, but what are some of your favorite videos of all time, or do you have any favorite videos of all time?
I do. It is a list, and I was earlier just naming band names, so I'm gonna go through this list. This list does not really go in order of favorite at all.
Okay.
Um, I like even now. I mean, now like gothic rock and death rock and all of that is really my favorite form of music. But I still like a whole bunch of other things. In fact, I think it's really unhealthy if you only like one thing. And
Agreed.
this hodgepodge will really tell you what kind of the heart of what I enjoyed out of MTV. So going down the list, we've got Video Killed the Radio Star by the Buggles. Just What I Needed by the Cars, my best friend's girl, Good Times Roll, Shake It Up, and then you might think those are by the Cars, and then by the Talking Heads, I had Once in a Lifetime, Burning Down the House, and Psycho Killer. For Duran Duran, for Duran Duran, these really would, and this is coincidental, but these are in the order of my preference on these two, are Hungry Like the Wolf and Rio. Ultravox, of course, we go back to Passing Strangers. Again, the only song by them that I really truly remember at this point, and now maybe I need to
Interesting. Hmm.
go on an Ultravox run for a bit. Then here's where you get a nice little serious genre jump. We've got Blessed Are the Sick, Rapture, and Immortal Rights by Morbid Angel, Staring Through the Eyes of the Dead by Cannibal Corpse. Then another bit of a jump. We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister. I Wanna Rock by Twisted Sister. Leader of the Pack, again, Twisted Sister. I Ran So Far Away by Flock of Seagulls. Tainted Love from Soft Cell. Master and Servant by Depeche Mode. You Don't Want Me by the Human League, also from them, Mirror Man. Uh,
Mm,
Every
good
Breath You
one.
Take from the Police. And this is getting to stuff that I listen to a lot now, Spellbound by Susie and the Banshees, Happy House, Hong Kong Garden, and Christine. Also, those are all Susie and the Banshees. Then we've got Detonation Boulevard, Temple of Love, Lucretia, My Reflection, Body and Soul, No Time to Cry, and Walk Away, and more. All of those are from the Sisters of Mercy. She's in Parties by Bauhaus, Bela Lugosi's Dead by Bauhaus. I mean, there's a whole bunch of their songs that I love, but again, focused on what was on MTV. Deliverance by The Mission, Love Like Blood by Killing Joke. That one, by the way, throws me for a little bit of a mental loop just because there's also a band called Love Like Blood, but I digress. 80s by Killing Joke, She Sells Sanctuary by The Cult, also
Great song.
Fire
Great song.
Firewoman from The Cult. And I know that, Ministry is really on, the industrial side of the fence, but one song that they've had on MTV that is really the goth anthem, Every Day is Halloween.
Yeah, were you a Ministry fan from the early days through their transition to the harder, industrial side? That was
Uh,
learning about Ministry's early days was very eye-opening for me because I had no idea.
oh yeah. They really did go through a lot of change, but if you want a real trip in terms of just stark difference in music, Pink Floyd, have you ever heard their first album?
No.
Okay, a lot of people haven't because I've talked to a lot of people and like everybody tells me no so far. One of my friends, Mike Stewart, huge AC/DC fan. He's got everything, including their bootlegs. Really, but like if you ever hear of a fan group called the AC/DC Family, he started that.
Oh, wow.
He was also really big into Pink Floyd, and he played for me their first album. He actually has it on record, and I don't like it. I'm glad that I heard it though. It sounds like early era Beatles.
Really?
Yes, this is you would not hear this and think if he didn't tell me that it was Pink Floyd, I would never in a million years guess that it was Pink Floyd. Their first album, I swear, sounds like really early crappy pop. Basically the Beatles before they found acid and got good.
Right, right, right. The precursor to I Want to Hold Your Hand. So Pink Floyd doing all the early Beatles, right? Yeah, and She Loves You. Yeah. Wow. Do you know off the top of your head, do you know the name of the Pink Floyd album? I'll look it up separately if you don't, but
I truly don't. I would love to answer that question for you, but I'll keep to honest answers. But
Beatles esque.
just to clarify, they sounded like early Beatles. They
Yeah.
weren't covering their songs.
I'll have to check that out and get back to you. But yeah, I love bands that have major transitions like that. So it's great that you brought up Ministry and Pink Floyd as well, because those, yeah,
It,
really, really funny. And it's always interesting to see how quickly did they transition. Was it
it's a
like, oh no, this is overnight, or this was, 10 years or so?
Yeah, it was a much bigger and more stark change. Also, as far as musical change goes, this one's a little bit more subtle in it, but you know the band Joy Division.
Yes,
Well, I don't know if you know this, you probably do, but New Order is Joy Division without Ian Curtis because
yes,
he hanged himself in 81, unfortunately. But if you sit down and you listen to Joy Division, like go back, their first when they first came out, they called themselves Warsaw. And they changed their name. See, back then a lot of bands were picking World War II themes, like Warsaw, the Sisters of Mercy. But what happened was they found there was another band that had Warsaw in their name. So they chose to change their name, and that's how they went to Joy Division. But if you listen to their music all of the way back to their Warsaw days, you will hear little hints of what would become brain
New
cells.
Order.
Thank you. I hate when
Hmm.
that happens. My brain cells like to shut down on me. But you'll hear what it sounds, those little hints of New Order in there. And I really think that if Ian Curtis hadn't died, they obviously would have stayed as Joy Division. But
Sure.
I think that as they evolved musically, they would have still gone in the direction of New Order, but with darker lyrical themes and, of course, with that haunting voice that Ian Curtis brought to it.
Absolutely. Their song Atmosphere is one of my favorite songs. It's very haunting and atmospheric. Pun completely intended. But yeah, another band, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but another band that I really enjoyed their transition, but that you can hear the subtleties in the early stuff is when before the early Human League. So before some of the guys left and created Heaven 17, Human League had that more underground, very computer heavy, synth heavy. Um, well, obviously the Human League was very synth heavy as well, but it was a more technical, sounded like machines. And the guys left, created Heaven 17. Human League does their own thing now. They're becoming a little more poppy, but you can hear the poppiness in the early Human League, um, which is then great to listen to both Heaven 17 and the Human League separately. And you're like, oh, it was that person who was the who controlled that specific sound. You can pinpoint it to certain people. So it's a great discussion. You bring up great points, Phil. Vil, thank you so much. This has been a great interview. I'm so happy you have these vivid memories, and you were my first launch interview. The first person I've talked to witness the launch, and the fact that you have those memories from being so young is so amazing. So again, thank you, and who knows, maybe we'll do another interview on some side topics.
Yeah, that'd be great. And thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.